represents all three branches of state governments. We work on criminal justice and public safety issues. Today's webinar is on Grant Writing 101. We are grateful to have Jane Browning from the International Community Corrections Association and for ICCA's co-sponsoring today's webinar. The event today will not address any specific grant programs, but will include information that should help any organization interested in applying for government or private grants. Just to make sure everyone has the right overview, this is not about second chance or burn grants or any other particular grant program. This information is provided to help any organization navigate grant writing for a number of different sources of grant funds. We are very grateful to the Annie E. Casey Foundation, the Joyce Foundation, and the Public Welfare Foundation for supporting the webinar today. Our speaker, Jane Browning, is the Executive Director of the International Community Corrections Association. She has over 36 years of experience in nonprofit management. Jane presents around the country on effective grant writing. She is the former Executive Director of the Learning Disabilities Association of America and spent 10 years as Executive Director of the Arkansas Endowment for the Humanities, a grant-making organization. Before we begin, I wanted to include a few reminders. If you would like to submit questions, please enter them in the question and answer box, the Q&A box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. We will answer as many questions as we can to get to the end of the webinar. A little disclaimer, however, we have more than 1,000 people registered for today's call, so we may not be able to get to each and every question that is answered. Please be patient with us. We'll try to get through as many as possible. Unfortunately, there is little that we can do to resolve individual connection problems during the webinar. You may be able to resolve problems by closing the webinar and logging back in again, or by calling WebEx technical support at 866-229-3239. This webinar is being recorded, and both the PowerPoint slides and the audio from today's webinar will be available on Thursday on our website at reentrypolicy.org. We will send a reminder email out and a copy of the slides or a link to the slides out to everyone on Thursday, and you can download them from our website. This time I'd love to turn the webinar over to Jane so she can go through the Grant Writing 101 content.
Thanks very much, Jessica. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for taking time out on what in Washington is a gorgeous sunny day to spend some time with me while we talk about basic grant writing concepts and the elements that you need to put together for any grant proposal that you're going to be preparing. As Jessica mentioned, I have been in the nonprofit business for a long, long time, many decades, and I have been doing fundraising ever since the very first day. I've done just about anything that you can think of to name. I've sold products door to door. I have organized bowl-a-thons. I've organized black tie gala dinners, roasts and toasts, fundraising cruises. I even put on a Hollywood movie premiere one time, which I will never do again. And I am here to tell you that different fundraising activities fulfill different functions for an organization. But if your main objective is to really raise some cash money, there is no substitute for grant writing. But far and away, it provides the greatest returns for your investment of time. And it is therefore sort of at the pinnacle of the fundraising pyramid. Because of that, it tends to make people think that there's some sort of a mystique surrounding the process of grant writing, that grant writers have to be some sort of holders of the secret key to the treasure, that they have some sort of arcane knowledge or special expertise that the typical regular old Joe and Jane don't have at their command. And the secret of grant writing mystique is that there isn't one. Anybody who can write a sensible business letter has the capability to write a really good winning grant proposal. You can do it. The key to being effective in your grant writing is to be prepared to really roll up your sleeves and apply some elbow grease. It is a lot of hard, tedious work. Writing, I don't know anybody for whom writing is just a fluent, eloquent natural talent, that words just flow from your pen. Writing is like drawing blood. It is really, really hard work, and you just have to be prepared to tackle the job and do it, and you will get that grant proposal written. Before you even take up your pen or your keyboard to start writing your grant proposal, you want to assemble what I refer to as a case statement, and this is an explanation, a description of your organization in just a few succinct sentences, a couple of paragraphs that conveys to the world who you are and why you are so special. A case statement is an organizational operation. It isn't something you can write by yourself. You need to talk to the historians in your organization, the founders of the group. What did they intend? What was their vision when they put this organization into place? What was it that they were hoping to achieve? You have to talk to your current key leaders and ask them, what are they doing to fulfill that mission? What is their vision for the future? You have to talk to your customers. What have they gotten out of it? How do they see the organization? What has that provided to them? And when you have done those interviews, and this can be a very informal basis, I'm not suggesting it's a lengthy process necessarily, that you want to write down exactly who you are, what have you accomplished. You know, the Doing Right organization served 23,000 hot meals to homeless people within the last 6 months. You know, facts, statements of your statistical track record. How are you a leader? What have you done to be innovative? We were the first people to do this. We pioneered that program. We started this up and spun it off, and now it has been taken over by the county as a permanent part of our community, et cetera, et cetera. You also want to make it clear how you are unique, how you are fulfilling a particular niche within the continuum of your industry. You are special. Why should funders trust you with your money? What have you done with other people's money? List a few of your donors. Say, you know, we have received numerous federal grants with which we have accomplished A, B, and C. We have been good stewards of the public's money. You want to put it together enough tightly packed, really impressive information for the reader of your case statement to say, wow. I want to say just another word here at this point about who your reader is. Every grant proposal you submit is either going to be read by one or more individuals. Sometimes it's a peer review panel who will be experts within your field. Sometimes it will be a civilian, random group of members of a board of directors. I believe it was mentioned I was the director of the Arkansas Endowment for the Humanities. We had 21 board members. They were appointed by the governor of the state of Arkansas, and they read those grant proposals. Not every one of them had expertise in the particular field that they were reading about, but they were the ones who were the decision makers. So you have to write in plain English. You have to make your case very clear to this anonymous reader out there. That person is your target, and that is your audience, and you have to keep that person in mind the whole time you're writing your grant. Here are the basic elements of what's in any grant proposal. It doesn't matter whether this is an RFP from the federal government, whether it is responding to a program announcement from a private foundation, or even if it's a 3- or 4-page letter to a corporate funder seeking their financial support. Anybody who's going to give you money needs to have answers to the questions that are related to these pieces of information. What is this money for? What are you going to do with it? And how do you attempt to achieve that? Who's going to be the people who are going to be undertaking these tasks? So think of these as jigsaw puzzle pieces that can be reassembled in many different ways depending upon the format of the grant proposal that is given to you, depending upon the questions that are asked within the request for proposal. They will put it in all different kinds of order. I have put them here in what I consider to be the Jane Browning logical assembly of information. Other people may see it differently and may ask for these pieces to come up in different parts of your proposal. But if you have a file with each one of these pieces of information on hand, you can respond and respond quickly to any request for proposal. Your goals, objectives, and activities, your timeline, they're going to differ from one project to another, but sort of the framework within which you're going to slot a particular project narrative is always going to remain the same. And so you are preparing yourself, even if you can't get your proposal in for the OJJDP grant that's due the 20th of whatever this time. If you start working on these grant proposal pieces now, you will have these elements prepared to stick into a proposal when the next RFP comes down. You'll be able to assemble your grant proposal with these various pieces at any time. When you have a stack of paper that represents your proposal, on the top of the stack is going to be a cover letter. If you are applying electronically through grants.gov with the federal government, something like that, they don't give you an opportunity really to write a cover letter. But if you are at any time putting in a paper proposal to a foundation or whatever, you will want to include a cover letter. It's one more element in making your case, in presenting your persuasive arguments for why you are such a great organization. So a cover letter is a good thing if you have the opportunity to include it. Every proposal also requires, and this is whether it's electronic or not, is going to ask you for an abstract. The abstract is a very succinct summary of what your proposal is, proposes, asks, and hopes to accomplish. It's really tricky to write a couple or three paragraphs that summarizes a proposal that might be 10, 20, 30 pages long. I recommend that you attack the cover letter and the abstract last. Write the proposal first so that you know what you're summarizing, and then go to your abstract and your cover letter. Or, if you are having just a heck of a time getting started with your writing process, let's start with a cover letter, because that's common ground, that's familiar territory. You know how to write a letter to somebody. So if that's what it takes to get that ink start to flow out of your pen, start with your cover letter. And then you can come back and edit that draft at a later point in time. The first serious segment of a real proposal is going to be introductory material. It can be called the background, it can be called the history, and you want to give a little bit of a global picture of what general problem you're dealing with. If you were going to be writing a prisoner reentry proposal for second chance grant, you might talk about how did this prisoner reentry situation come to be such social crisis, and what has your organization's role been with the criminal justice population in the past? Some background, some history, how we came to this point. And this is a good place for you to stick your case statement. Your case statement can go in the cover letter, it can go in this introduction, sometimes it can even go in the abstract if it is succinct enough. But this is a good place for you to say right up front, and we're a wonderful organization and do wonderful things for the community. The statement of need is the part of your proposal that's going to require some of your research to come into play. You're going to have to explain the lay of the land, explain the circumstances in which you're operating in a framework that is statistical, data-driven, that explains, how many people are affected. What is the size of your community? What are its demographics? How does this population fit in with the rest of the population? You need to really take a look at the needs in your community. You need to describe the problem that you're trying to address and document your claims. You want to not just say there are so many people doing this, but you want to be able to cite some source for your statistics and for your data. Use current data and statistics. This is, if you go back 2 years from now and reapply for a similar grant with the same organization. Don't try to use the same data because the world changes rapidly. You want to refresh your research as you proceed through the years. Quote, target audience representative. Almost every funder is extremely interested in knowing that you are really in touch with the population you are proposing to serve. You want their voices heard in the content of your proposal. You want to make sure that the client-driven nature of your operation is in the forefront. And some foundations are more interested in this than others, but it's important to have the input of your customers reflected in your proposal. Explain what has been done to date. You know, this isn't the beginning of the planet. We didn't start doing reentry yesterday. We started doing it 40, 50 years ago. So talk about the little bit of the history, how has it progressed to come to this point, and then where are we now, what remains to be done. And that's moving you forward into expressing what your proposed project is by explaining what remains to be done. And you want to not exaggerate or blow the problem out of proportion, but if you describe your problem honestly enough, you are going to make your reader, that all-important reader that we're talking to, say, oh, this is really terrible. What in the world are we going to do about it? And it's at that point that you ride in as the shining knight on your white horse and say, this is what we're going to do about it. You're going to describe your project and how you are going to address and provide solutions to the problem, the dire problem that you have just described. Briefly describe your project. You're going to get into much more detailed explanation of what you're going to do a little bit further on. State up front exactly what you're asking for. We are requesting $500,000 in financial support for this project. And we'll come up with half of it, and we're seeking the other part from other groups, and we want $70,000 from you specifically, however that works out. Say what money you're looking for to do this project. Very, very important point here. Explain why your project does not duplicate existing services. Because people, especially people who sort of know your field but aren't intimate with your community and what's going on exactly, may say, well, I always thought that the YMCA did that, provided shelter for people. Why do we need to do something different? Well, you need to explain why. The why is an important part in the continuum of this homelessness, but your program is going to be the transitional piece that helps people become independent and get their own home, whatever. But explain how you're aware of what's going on in the community. You're not living in a vacuum. You know that other people are working on these problems. You're just tackling it from your perspective, and you're going to do the best possible job within your niche. Talk about how you might join hands with people who are on either side of your niche so that you can work collaboratively across the community to bring synergy to solving problems, etc. And how does this project fit within your mission statement? Are you just chasing the dollars and starting to do a new program because that's what the money is offered for? Or is this at the core of what you've already been doing? And you can make a pretty persuasive statement, a pretty persuasive case about how it does fit into your mission, even if you haven't been doing exactly this thing before. So you can chase a few dollars and get away with it, but you have to explain how it relates to the work that you are already expert in doing. Here's where we get to describing more of the particulars about the details of your proposed project. There are goals, there are objectives, there are activities. The goals present a global vision of what you aim to achieve. These are big picture goals that you want to, and we'll get into more detail about this too, but usually it's more than one goal. You want to accomplish 2 or 3 major goals, and here are some examples of goals. I'm using Fetal Alcohol Syndrome prevention as our example here because I've written probably more grants for FAS prevention than anything else. Here are some goals. Hello? I thought I heard a voice coming at me there. One goal of preventing fetal alcohol syndrome would be to reduce the overall incidence of fetal alcohol syndrome, prevent the pregnant women from consuming alcoholic beverages, a very different kind of goal, but all towards the same end, educate teens on risks of drinking alcohol, identify and support families of children with fetal alcohol syndrome, provide pregnant alcoholic women access to residential treatment. Now, these are broad goals relating to fetal alcohol syndrome prevention. You wouldn't want to try to accomplish all of these goals in one project. It's much too ambitious. But you could select 1, 2, and 3 as the goals that you wanted to tackle in this particular project. But these are examples of those kinds of global, big picture things that you want to accomplish, real changes in society. Objectives fall underneath those goals, and they are a little bit more constrained, a little bit more time limited, a little bit more strategic in your attack on achieving these different goals. They are specific outcomes leading towards the achievement of those goals. They focus on what will get done, not what you will do. This is all about performance outcomes. You can talk about process, which is we will do this, we will do that, we will do the other thing. That's process. And that's comfortable, and it's easy to promise. For sure we will do these things. What will those things accomplish? That's a little bit harder to get your head around, to actually commit yourself to achieving particular outcomes. But that's what the world is all about these days, are performance outcomes. And so you have to put it on the line and say, we will accomplish this, this, and this. Not just we will do this, we will get this done. And because you're making these promises that are really hard to commit yourself to, you want to be sure you're setting reasonable, achievable goals, that you have measures for yourself that are conservative. If you overachieve, if you exceed beyond your wildest dreams, that's great. That's award-winning. But if you set reasonable, easily measured goals here, then you're going to be successful regardless of whether you hang the moon or not. Here's an example of a goal set together with its objectives, reducing the incidence of fetal alcohol syndrome. Number 1, you're going to recruit and train a speakers bureau. Number 2, you're going to schedule at least 40 speaking presentations. You're going to provide 40 middle school counselors with FAS prevention resource packets. So this is the big goal, and these others are the more specific, focused, achievable strategies. And then activities are the little pieces underneath the objective. In order to recruit that speakers bureau, you're going to do A, B, C, D, E, step-by-step actions that lead to the accomplishment of each objective. And be sure that among your activities, you are including the collection of data by which your project will ultimately be evaluated. You need to build your evaluation into the proposal, into the active project pieces, because everybody's very interested in the evaluation, knowing whether this was successful or not. So here now is an example of an objective that is lined up with its specific activities. Here's your speakers bureau. You're going to mail press releases. You're going to try to get some feature articles placed in the newspaper. You're going to post things up on the television bulletin board. You're going to go on to some local talk shows. And so this is what it looks like when you have this all in an outline in your proposal, the goal indented, the objective, underneath the objective, the activities, 1, 2, 3. You've all seen this format and worked with it, I'm sure, that this is just, kind of what it looks like. And then you want to have a timeline. there are two different kinds of timelines. This is the Gantt chart. This is Grant chart. It's actually a Gantt chart. And you show your activities month by month. This is how it looks. You see that you're going to do activity 1A in October and November. Activity 1B starts in November but will stretch over the course of several months through February. Da, 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 da. This is plotting out in this sort of horizontal calendar what you are going to achieve. There's another kind of timeline. I tried to put it on a slide and I couldn't make it fit, where you show the goal, you express the goal in the verbiage that you used in your grant proposal, and then you indicate by what time will that goal be accomplished, and then in the final column you put down which personnel on the project are going to be responsible for the accomplishment of that task. And this can go on for pages and pages and pages. You have this big timeline of outlining each one of your goals, objectives, and activities according to how long it will take and who's going to be doing it. So you're presenting the same information over and over again in different formats, in different modules. And this is important, bearing that reader in mind again. Some people are visual people, some people are numbers people, some people are narrative people. So you're communicating your message about your project in all of these different modalities so that you'll reach whoever that reader might be and however they might best receive your information. Another section that you want to line out, and this is one of those files that you can keep on your computer to plug into different proposals along the way, because the personnel in your office very often remains the same. You want to give the job title with a job description. You want to name the individual if they're already on staff, along with the qualifications they have. Or if it's going to be a new hire, you say, these are the qualifications we will be recruiting for. And amongst your personnel, it isn't just the paid staff you want to list. You want to list all of the experts within your organization that you'll be relying upon to bolster and inform this project. You want to include advisors, consultants, volunteers, and assign major activities to specific people. You want to prove to your reader that you have thought this through. And here I'm going to put a big neon sign up and say, this is one of the main reasons you write a grant proposal, not only to be awarded the funds that you are seeking, but to put on paper that demonstrates your thought processes of how you've really, really figured out how to do this project. This is as much for your benefit and the benefit of your organization in developing its ideas as it is in actually getting the grant award. This is a great means, a great technique of strategic planning, really. Grant proposals are good for you. All right. Target audience. The funders want to know who this is all about. Who is this for? And once again, you have to rely on your statistics. You can't just say, there's a whole bunch of people coming out of prison in our community. You want to be able to say, last year, 60,000 people came back into this county from the state prison, and they don't have any work, and they don't have any place to live, et cetera, et cetera. Describe your relationship to this target audience and your past history. Why are you involved with them? Who are they to you? Who are you to them? And how will you identify them, engage them? How will you reach them? In the example of the Fetal Alcohol Syndrome prevention project, where we're recruiting these speakers for the Speakers Bureau, how do you reach out into the community? A whole new project. How do you reach out into the community and find people who are appropriate for this Speakers Bureau? And do you put flyers up in the laundromat? Yes, that's a great way of reaching people. They have a lot of time in there to read. How are you going to be doing outreach to your particular community? once you have your project up and running and you start getting some results, how do you disseminate this information about your project to your community? How do you publicize your activities? How do you get your target audience involved in these outreach efforts? And how will the project outcomes and findings be disseminated? You're collecting data, you're evaluating your program. Once it's all said and done, how do you tell the world about what was accomplished in your project? Where do you go to share this information? And it's important because people want to be able to replicate your successful program. Okay. Evaluation, we've talked about that, the importance of research. You have to write an evaluation section. Take it from me, this is my least favorite part of writing a grant proposal, the part about being critical about yourself and really being honest about what you're able to achieve. It's great to tout all of your ambitions and goals and so on, but to really say, okay, now, when the push comes to shove, how did we really do? You need to write this evaluation section so that each evaluation element is tied directly to the objectives that you have spelled out. We are going to recruit so many people for our Speakers Bureau. Well, you evaluate according to whether you reached that numerical goal, and you also have some qualitative measures that you want to put in there. These people are especially qualified for the Speakers Bureau because of this rich diversity of their backgrounds, et cetera, et cetera. Describe the tools that you will use. Well, we're going to use a survey form. We're going to do an electronic survey. We're going to make telephone interview follow-up, blah, blah, blah. And in developing your evaluation measures, be sure to include your customers in determining the degrees of success. Is it enough to have been, gotten a job at the McDonald's for 3 weeks when you came out of prison, or was it more successful to the customer to be engaged in a real career-building vocational skill set that they developed? What determines success and to whom? And describe how your evaluation findings will inform future planning. It's like taking funds and reinvesting them in your future. The funds you had here is knowledge of what you've learned from doing this project. How will the lessons learned be folded back into the whole nature of your organization? What is your board going to learn from this? What is your organization going to gain from having undertaken this project? How will you do things better in the future? Budget. I said earlier, some of your readers are numbers people. Some of your readers are narrative people. Well, the numbers people might skip the entire narrative and go straight to the budget. And your budget is just one other way of explaining the same message that you have already presented in outline form and in timelines and in narrative description. This is the numbers telling the same exact story. It's the second way of reading and writing a grant proposal. Check your items against your list of activities. That's how you write a budget. You said you're going to, send press releases out to these newspapers. Well, how much time does staff time does that take, and how much paper does that take, and how much postage does that take? You look at your activities, you figure out what that costs, you write it into your budget. Show the basis for your computation. You can't just say, office supplies are going to run about $200. You have to be specific, where we need pencils and folders, and we need name badges, and we need copy paper, and we need to do some printing, and we know it costs this much because of this bid that we got, or we went online and looked at what a Dell laptop costs, and that we know that airlines cost this much for so many miles. You have to show how you arrived at the numbers that you put into the budget, using real market bids and values. Always show matching funds. The grant proposal, the request for grants may not call for matching grants, but if your organization is always going to expend some sort of investment in whatever project you do, it's going to take time and energy and the involvement of experts, even if they're volunteer experts. Calculate what your matching contribution to the project is going to be, even if it's all in kind, even if it's all donated services. But put up, you want to show that you're not just asking for something for nothing. You're putting a lot on the line here, too, with your organization. Show the matching funds. Use separate pages for separate years. Don't try to blend it all into one, like, here's our 2-year budget. Say, here's year 1, and then separate. Here's year 2. Here's the total at the bottom. Double check the math. Enough said on that. You can look like an idiot faster by somebody looking at the bottom of your budget page and seeing that it doesn't total than, can undo a lot of really hard work. So double check your math. Budget elements. You want to account for personnel, the fringe benefits, consultants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is pretty much what's involved. And again, the feds are going to give you one kind of format to use for their budget, and the public foundation is going to ask for something different. But these are the elements that will always be included in your budget. Here's what a budget page looks like. You say, okay, the director is the big fund. This is the person you're asking for money. The big fund is going to supply $30,000. I'm coming up with $10,000 of in-kind for a total of $40,000. Benefits of 20%, blah, blah, blah. Mileage. And so this is the way you do it. That you have totals across, and then you'll have totals at the bottom of the page. And if you have, a third party who's already supporting part of your project, you'll include them as a 4th column. Now you've written your budget, or you've written your proposal and your budget. Now you want to be able to put some additional information in there that's going to be sort of, letters of recommendation, endorsements from other people, memorandums of agreement that you've established with these collaborators you're working with in the community. And as I say, letters of support, especially from representatives of your target audience. If you can have someone who's gone through your reentry program, gone through your mentoring program, and writes a letter and says, this changed my life, these people really know what they're doing, that carries a lot of weight. It's these testimonials from people who've been successful, carries a lot of weight. Generally, the funder will want to see the list of your board members and their affiliations. Who is this group? Who represents this group? And I'm sure that all of you are very proud of your board members, and you're happy to tout their affiliations and who they are in your community. Include your mission statement of your organization. If you have an annual report, include that. If you have an audit report, that will very often be required that you send your most recent audited financial statements along with the proposal. They also very often want to know your list of donors over the last year or two. Who's supporting this organization? Are they already getting so much money from some other source that they don't need ours? That's part of what they're looking for. But, if you have a diverse donor base, that's a really good thing. It's evidence of support from your community, just like letters of support would be. So, not every funder will allow you to include all of these attachments, but if attachments are required, these are some of the very common ones that will be asked for, and that you should keep on hand. You should always have that updated list of your board members ready to stick into a proposal. Now you go back to the cover letter and abstract. Remember that? You set it aside at the beginning. Now you have to go back and do it. Concentrate on the purpose and the outcomes, not the process so much. Be sure to include the amount of your request in your cover letter right up front. We are writing to seek $125,000 for the purpose of preventing fetal alcohol syndrome. If the case statement hasn't fit anywhere else, put it in the cover letter. All right, let's go over this one more time. Let the proposal sit and rest for a few days. You've been frothing at the mouth. You've just been pouring ink out your pen. You've been writing like a crazy person for days, And, by the time you get done, you can't remember what your opening sentence was. So set the proposal aside for a day or two, let it cool off, let it rest, and you'll either go back to it in a day or two and say, I wrote this, my gosh, this is so impressive, I'd give myself this money tomorrow. Or you might say, I wrote this, I can't believe I said that. Look at how stupid this is in the middle of your... So, it just go back and do some editing after it's had a minute to rest. This second point, I can't stress to you how important this is. Share with a disinterested friend. This doesn't mean your office manager. This doesn't mean your colleague. This means your husband. Somebody who's in a completely different line of work, who isn't following every moment of the development of the Second Chance Act. Somebody who works in construction, let's say, this is the reality check. Can they make sense of it? Does your writing make sense to somebody who isn't living and working in this milieu every single day? It ought to. It ought to be comprehensible to the average English language reader. This is a tough test, but it's a really good one to do. And did I mention double check your math? Here are some common writing tips. This applies across the board, whether you're writing an article, whether you're writing for the newspaper, whether you're writing a grant proposal. Set the jargon. Every industry, every field has got lots and lots of jargon. Avoid it. Use the active voice. I'll talk a little more about that in a moment. Use strong, forceful verbs. Don't use acronyms. Spell things out. And make it easy on your reader. Prepare your proposal with your reader in mind. If you have referenced a particular activity or a person or an organization in page 2, and you are referring back to it in page 11, spell it out again. Even though it seems redundant to you, your reader will have forgotten about it by page 11, and they will be happy for your help in remembering, so they don't have to flip back through the pages to find that reference. Jargon. There's nothing wrong with this sentence. This is out of a scientific psychological journal. I think one of my board members actually wrote this sentence. Nothing wrong with the sentence. Examination of the univariate correlations between the variables and the OSL decision rated from minimum equal 1 to maximum equal 3, reduced the pool of candidate predictors from 170. What in the world does that mean? If you're writing for a scientific journal and you're writing for your peers and colleagues who are in the science community, that's a good sentence. If you're writing it in a grant proposal, scratch it out and write something else. Avoid the jargon. Active versus passive voice. The project will be conducted by. That is the passive voice. Go back through, write your whole proposal. Don't agonize over it sentence by sentence. But when you have let it rest and go back and edit it, look at every sentence, and every time you run into the passive voice, change it to the active voice. The project will be conducted by SEP. The project director and assistant will design, organize, whatever. I hope you get the distinction here between the active and passive. Here's another example. It was believed that there would be no differences. The project organizers believed. Who believed? Who was doing the believing? Make that an active voice sentence. Forceful verbs. Here's just some examples, of different ways of phrasing things. People exiting prisons and jails, they have trouble finding jobs, or do they face enormous challenges in the workplace? Do they collide with barriers to finding employment? Do they experience stigma and discrimination? There's lots of different ways to color, phrase, accentuate, emphasize, go through your mental thesaurus. Again, this is part of the editing process. I have this verb to be, or could I substitute something that is more forceful, more colorful, more descriptive instead? Grant writing tips allow plenty of time, and I know you're all groaning because you get these requests for proposals, and it says, and this proposal will be due in 30 days, and you don't ever have lots of time. That's why it's important to take these grant writing tips to heart and start writing the basic elements of any grant proposal so that they are in hand to assemble when those grant proposals come down the pike. But you want to get on it right away as soon as you can, even if you only have 30 days. Don't wait till the 29th day. Give yourself plenty of time because it always takes longer than you think. The copier is going to break down. You are going to be thrown off the network when you're trying to submit through grants.gov. You are going to have a telephone conference call from hell that keeps you after hours and away from writing your grant. You want to give it as much time in advance as you can. Answer the application guidelines questions and follow the rules. This is really hard for me. You know, I always want to bend the rules. Well, surely they meant to include us in this RFP. It can't really be just about drug treatment. So, but, you know, if that's what they're asking for, that's what they want to get. So be sure that you follow their guidelines. If they give you a contact name for someone to help you with questions about the proposal, call them, email them, ask them the questions that you have. Be responsive to the needs that they are expressing. The closer you come to meeting their guidelines, the closer you are to getting the grant money. Study those guidelines thoroughly. Become intimate with the details. If there are program officers in the foundation, get acquainted with them. Listen to their advice. Do what they tell you to do. They're not there to just, you know, slap their lips and entertain themselves. You know, they're giving you sound advice, and you are serving yourself well by following their advice. When you get turned down, and you will, ask why. Not everyone is willing to share with you the reasons why you were turned down, but a good panel review will send you the review panelist's comments about your proposal, and it's a great assistant in going the next round and reapplying for that kind of grant in the future, to know what they caught that was missing in your grant proposal that you can be sure to stick in the next time. And the most important tip I have to give you of all is that if at first you don't succeed, try again. I have had more grants turned down than I know how to count, but I have also raised millions of dollars for nonprofit organizations over the course of the decades because I just keep trying over and over again. Believe a project that is worthy will find the support that it deserves. Best wishes to you all. Great good luck in your grant writing efforts. And I believe we are going to have some questions now.
We have a few sort of federal grant reminders and tips, and then we will go into the question and answer section. There are a number of federal grants that are out pending, some due as early as tomorrow, a number of other grants that are due in June, many that are being circulated by the Department of Justice, from second chance grants to burn grants, you name it. Department of Labor has grants coming out this summer, so we thought it would be helpful to you all to not cover any of these individual grants specifically, but provide a few tips and tricks for you to keep in mind as you start looking or putting your applications together for these different federal funding streams. The first one is read the solicitation. As Jane mentioned, be familiar with the materials, read it over and over again until you know all the details, access the program officers, whether it's at a foundation or within the federal government. You can ask questions, but the number one important step in that process is to read every word of that solicitation so you're very familiar with it. Does your organization meet the eligibility requirements? Do you have the right partners on board? Is your target population in line with what the solicitation specifies? It is critically important that you read that solicitation before you put pen to paper, before you pick up the phone and access someone at one of these agencies. It's the first step. There are a lot of folks that have been in touch with us and that have in particular talked to some of the key contacts at the Department of Justice who haven't necessarily gone through all those materials, could have a lot of questions that were already answered there and also have a better understanding of what they need to do to be competitive for these grant monies. Second is follow the instructions. And when I say follow the instructions, I mean to the T. I like to call this the beware of the wastebasket. If you do not meet their basic minimum requirements for a federal grant, you don't even make it to that peer review section. You end up in the wastebasket. And these are not just big picture eligibility or target population. Those are definitely included. But do not ignore the technical requirements of these grants either. 1-inch margins, 12-point font, Times New Roman font, double-spaced, making sure that you have the attachments for letters of support, letters of agreement, memoranda of understanding, the budget information. If you are missing any one element, the grant reviewers can, completely skip over your application and you end up in the wastebasket. All that hard work is for naught if you don't follow these rules very strictly. So in addition to going through that solicitation, make sure that you put a checklist together, you get your highlighter out, and you know every single requirement that's in there and that you meet every single one. You can't sort of cut corners or skip individual ones, even if they seem tedious, because all of your work can be sort of in there with that wastebasket if you don't get through that first vetting process. The second sort of tip in this list is to follow the point system. Most of these federal grants are very specific in the number of points that you're given. You may think it's incredibly important to provide all this information and background materials and lots of attachments, letters of support, whatever. Follow where those points are and make sure that you don't miss one section. You could have scored off the charts and gotten a full 20 points for the statement of the problem. But if you sort of cut corners or you missed a few requirements in another section of that grant, your point scale could be much, much lower. As Jane mentioned, there are amazing resources for you for federal grants for the program officers that are working on these programs, whether it's Health and Human Services, Department of Labor, or Department of Justice. Access them, understand that they are sort of in the process of being inundated by the field. Potentially there's a lot of quantity and folks that are seeking for help, so be patient and make sure that you've done your homework so you know where your real questions are, where you're going to have difficulties, and you've gone through every page of that solicitation beforehand. And the last thing that I would remind everyone is, particularly with federal grants, you need to start early. These are not paper grants. It can be very different from grants from a local community foundation or a private grant maker. You have to go through an electronic system in most instances, whether it's grants.gov or a grants management system or something specific to the department. You usually need to have a logon information and a password and have other steps that you need to follow well before you can ever submit your documentation. So start easily 2 weeks before that deadline, even if you don't have your information ready and your narrative and your actual grant proposal materials are not completed. Start early to get those first steps taken care of so you can be ready when the time comes. Also leave time for a time delay or waiting or any technical difficulties with the stimulus monies and lots of grants that are coming out right now. There have been many instances, particularly with the Department of Justice, of some delays in getting these grant materials in. And you don't want to miss that deadline because you sort of can't foresee that there's going to be a website crash or some type of technical problem that you're going to need some help navigating. So leave extra time, rely on the staff, but make sure that you do your homework. I think at this point we're going to go into a question and answer session. We have a number of questions that have come in, and again, we have around 600 participants on the call at this moment, so if we don't get through to every single question, we apologize, and we'll try to provide some support materials on our website after the webinar as early as tomorrow. First question we have is from Stephanie. It says, the question is, when we stated that we need to provide recent data to support our research, how recent should that be, 1 to 5 years? Jane, do you want to take that one?
Generally, you're not going to have research available that is any newer than like 2 years old, but that's a good benchmark to shoot for. If you can find something that is describes your situation within the past 2 years, that's good. If you went back 5 years, that's acceptable too. Depends on how much in flux your particular situation might be. You know, if there's been a recent economic downturn, for instance, you know, the homelessness statistics might have shot up within just recent months. So if you're addressing that kind of an urgent problem that is a new situation, you might want to go to news reports to collect some more recent data. But if you're looking at homelessness in your community over time, going back a couple of years, going back even 5 years, probably would be sufficient if that's what you have on hand.
Great. I have another question from Loretta. If you are a new organization and you have a good track record, can you apply for grants?
Absolutely. And I think in particular the second chance grants are especially welcoming of people who are starting up programs or people who are less sophisticated organizations, smaller organizations, and I know that the nonprofit Second Chance Act grants have that RFP has closed for this year, but Second Chance is going to be around for a while, so you know, you'll have future opportunities to go. And these people, the government is looking for new organizations. They're trying to bring people into the field. They're very welcoming of newer, smaller, less sophisticated organizations. So by all means, and even if you're not looking to the government, if you're looking for private funding or corporate funding, you know, every organization has to start somewhere. So by all means, remember my tip, you know, volume is important. Try again. If you get a good proposal and you shop it around, you will find a funder. And once you have one funder, you can point to that person as having had faith in you. You can point to that experience of having shown good stewardship of public funds and so forth. So, you know, just dive into the pool.
Great. I have a question from Catherine that cultural competency is a frequent section in grant proposals. In rural areas in the country, we may not see a lot of racial or ethnic diversity. How do you suggest we approach these areas in those cases?
Well, I would suggest that you go find some good resource material on the subject. Google cultural competency, find some resource books, find some maybe training outlines and so on, so that you can be familiar with what the issues are. You can address those issues as they arise. And honestly, in even the very most remote and rural communities in the United States, the demographics are changing dramatically over time. I grew up in Nebraska, and the Hispanic, my sister lives in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, and a third of the population there is Hispanic. So, you know, the cultural competency issue is relevant regardless of where you live in this country. So research the materials that are available on it, become familiar with them, address them in your proposal, how you're going to deal with it. You know, it might be as simple as striving to make as many of your publications available in more than one language, or to have somebody on your staff who can talk to folks who are from Korean backgrounds. That's a huge thing in Maryland, the Korean population here. So, you know, don't shy away from it, and don't be afraid to show that you don't have a lot of expertise with it, but do show that you've done your homework with it and that you have sought to be responsive to your ability to do so.
We have a question from David about RFP formats. Is there a one-stop site where we can view and compare the different formats?
Well, I'm assuming that most of the folks who are on this call are coming through the justice frame, and I would recommend that, you know, whether you're applying for it or not, you download one of the Bureau of Justice Assistance or this new OJJDP RFP from the Office of Justice Programs, and just, you know, take a look at how they are set out and become familiar with kind of their framework. Or you can go online to any one of the major foundations and see what their grant guidelines are like, and they spell it out pretty much. This is the format we want you to submit it in. Another format that I like to recommend to people is SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They offer conference grants every period. A couple of times a year they have a competition for conference grants. This has been going on for 10, 15 years, maybe longer. And that format remains pretty steady over time. So that's another RFP that you might want to pull down and take a look at to get an idea of the kinds of formatting that people are looking for. That SAMHSA grant also has got a great section at the end. It's all of these sample evaluation forms for collecting data on the success of your conference. And I've used those many, many times. I've just stolen from SAMHSA. Their evaluation forms are great.
There was a question from Susan. Should our donor list have amounts donated as well, or would that be aggravating for donors?
That's kind of up to your individual donors, and it's information you may already have. You may know that some of your donors like to remain more or less anonymous. A lot of donors don't like to be targeted as being a soft touch, that other people are going to come flocking to them to raise funds. It's not so much a problem when you're, this is a very private document that you're submitting to the government. I mean, it's a public document, but there aren't going to be a whole lot of readers. It's not going to be published in your newspaper or anything like that. So I think putting the amounts down is not a bad idea. Something I often do is to give ranges. People who gave $5,000 and more include blah, 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 and people who gave from $1,000 to $5,000 are these other people. And then you avoid tagging a particular donor with a particular amount.
Great. Heather has asked if you can remind her what a case statement is.
It's a succinct, several sentences, a couple of paragraphs, summary of who your organization is, what their aim and mission is, what they have accomplished, their track record, what they mean to the community, why they are special, why you are a leader in your field, what makes you stand out. The case statement is the description of your organization that is going to make your reader go, wow.
Great. My computer has frozen up for a second. Here we go. I have another question. Would you recommend that there is a grant unit in each organization to monitor grant activities?
Absolutely. I don't know what kind of affluence you're coming from. Our office is way too small to dedicate somebody to that. But I actually had a position like that myself. I was the Director of Program Development for the ARC of Maryland for a number of years. And that was sort of, I studied the Federal Register every time it came out and, hunted for grant opportunities and circulated that information to our chapters around the state, as well as writing and organizing a lot of programs and stuff, too. But a unit, it would be great to have a unit that did nothing but monitor grants, but at least to have a dedicated individual would be, is highly recommended.
Great. We have another question. If your organization is a small organization and can't afford an audit, will your application be thrown out?
That's kind of a trick question, and you almost have to ask the funder that question. If they say, include your most recent audited financial statements, and you don't have any, the best you can do is to submit the financial statements you have, and if they don't like it, they'll, they might reject your proposal. Every federal grant is supposed to be audited by this special, there are regulations about the auditing federal grant monies. So you might write your audit into your grant proposal. If you put $3,000 down or something like that towards an audit of this project, because it's important. It's important. But if you don't have it, you don't have it. So submit what you've got. But you might want to ask for audit money.
Great. We have a question from Jennifer. Where do we find the federal point system? The point system for federal grants is actually specific to each individual grant, and it changes between them. So that's where it is critical that you read the solicitation very carefully. If you're going after one of the SAMHSA conference grants that Jane mentioned, they're going to have different requirements than a grant out of the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, which will be different from a grant that's coming out of the Bureau of Justice Assistance for Second Chance or for drug courts or a number of different things. So the point system and the priority considerations and the requirements are different for every single federal grant. So you have to read the requirements carefully. We have another question about we have several questions actually that I'll summarize on how do you find grants, federal grants or other grants, and what websites or other resources are available.
Grants.gov is the federal grant site, and you can go, it's just grants.gov. Go up there and it'll say funding opportunities, and you click on that, and there's a raft of proposals that are archived in grants.gov that you can look at. So that's the most central place to go and look. There are lots of announcements that come out, through the various organizations too, and you can get onto the mailing lists of the SAMHSA has an email list, and the National Justice Center, what do they call themselves, NCJRS, they have a newsletter that goes out, and BJA now has its own newsletter that goes out. I can't cite the websites and places to go off the top of my head for those resources, but a resource I can give to you is myself, J. Browning at ICCA.web. That's not right. J. Browning at ICCAweb.org. And if you will email me, I'll put you on my email distribution list. And I send out a monthly e-newsletter that includes all of the new grant solicitations that relate to criminal justice, prisoner reentry, that kind of thing. And again, I screwed up my address the first time. I'll say it again. J. Browning at ICCAweb.org. If you'll email me, I'll put you. Yeah, thank you. There we go. I'll put you on my distribution list. I don't cover everything by any means, but it's a place you can start.
And at reentrypolicy.org, our website, we list, and on our website and on our newsletter, we list funding opportunities as well. So there are ways to use some of the national organizations to access that information. That concludes our webinar for today. We're running into the overtime period now. Apologize for those of you who we weren't able to get to your questions. We will provide this download for the webinar and the PowerPoint slides on our website at www.reentrypolicy.org. Thank you so much, Jane, for joining us today and for your presentation. It's extremely helpful, and I know everyone has enjoyed your tips and tricks and will benefit greatly from them. And thank you for joining us today. We hope that you'll join us on a future webinar.